So for this video, it's going to be 3 steps to reduce pain. Now I say steps, but it's more so variables that you can adjust in your life to help reduce daily pain. But before I get into it, just as a preface, these steps are based on current thoughts and evidence from various rehab professionals around the world, in addition to my own opinion and experience. And these are very simplified. To get an exact rehab protocol that's catered towards you, you definitely want to book in with a professional in your area. And this video is meant for educational purposes only. Also, these steps are based on generalized musculoskeletal pain, not on actual pathologies such as like a sprained ankle or even like a broken bone or anything else that is actually quantifiable, rather than just the general aches and pains that we feel throughout the day or aches and pains that we get in the gym. So, just as an overview, the 3 steps, as I've labeled them, are for 1, load management, number 2, movement selection, and number 3 is monitoring your stress levels. And we'll get into each individual one also in the context of a case study. So, for load management, consider any recent changes to your activity level. Have you increased your workload not only in the gym / during sport, but have you also been working more, and have you been doing even more laborious activities around the house? If you've been increasing multiple variables at once, consider dropping the effort in other variables so that you can keep up with recovery. Now, in the context of a case study, we're going to talk about Bob, and we're going to talk about him throughout all 3 steps. So Bob, just as to set you up for this, he's age 38. He's been working manual labor jobs for the past 10 years. He's been to the gym for about an hour on and off for the past 5 years, about 1 to 3 times a week. He usually misses a week about once a month. Bob decided he really wants to start getting in shape and to join a ball hockey league, which he played a lot of in his past when he was in his 20s. Bob's now on a mission. He bumps his gym days up to 4 days a week for still an hour without missing a week. He starts playing ball hockey on the weekends for practice as well. Bob is now complaining of back and knee pain after seemingly becoming healthier and adopting a more active lifestyle. So what's going on here? Well, if we look at Bob's past work capacity, he's worked about 8 hours a day, 5 days a week in a manual labor job. He previously went 1 to 3 hours in the gym per week. For 3 weeks each month, because he missed 1 week off the gym, and he had no extracurricular activity. Overnight, he chose to go from that into still working his 8 hours of manual labor for 5 days a week, but now he's in the gym for 4 hours in the gym for 4 weeks each month. And now he doesn't have any weeks off the gym, in addition to about 2 hours of ball hockey on the weekends. So if you look at old Bob, he had about 46 hours of rigorous activity per month. New Bob, overnight, he made this change immediately. He now has 64 hours of rigorous activity on average per month. So one of the main problems here is Bob didn't choose to slowly work into this new work capacity. He chose to dive right in. And usually that's not a good way of adopting a kind of more of an active lifestyle. We want to ease into things. We'll get into how we fix Bob later, but just as I guess I'll mention it now, I would get him to slowly add in extra hours in the gym in addition to ball hockey, while still keeping in mind his recovery. And we'll talk more about this in a bit. So next, we're going to move on to the next step, which is movement selection. So when we work towards a goal, whether it's something like lifting a lot or running for distance, or even being able to just get through work with less pain, it's sometimes a good idea to adopt new movement strategies. If we've been moving the same way for a long time, and yet that same movement still yields pain, it might be time to try something different, as the area, such as like the tissue around the particular pain, might be sensitized to that particular type of movement. We also need to assess whether or not our goals are in line with the type of movement we're performing. For example, are we focusing movement on pain relief or for performance? Because those are 2 very separate goals. Something I'll also mention is a lot of people choose to go the route of no pain, no gain. That is a very, very bad idea. If we're if we're experiencing pain with certain movements and we just keep trying to bulldoze it and bootstrap it and keep performing those same movements that cause pain, usually it doesn't get any better. It's actually going to increase the pain, because pain is an experience brought about by neurotransmitters in the body. If we keep stimulating the area around it, usually the pain just grows and grows and grows and becomes more sensitive and more sensitive and more sensitive, to the point where people need to start taking days off the gym, which is usually counterproductive to both being pain free and also impacts performance. Now let's talk about Bob. So Bob's having a rough time in the gym lately. He's been doing a body part split, so that's a type of workout where you do chest one day, like triceps another day, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're just breaking apart the body and training them on separate days. So he's been doing that type of workout that he saw in a bodybuilding magazine, and it involves a lot of new movements that Bob has very little experience in. Bob finds that he keeps getting some tweaks in his back and knees. What could be going on here? Well, the first thing we need to assess is whether or not the workout program is appropriate for Bob. See, Bob's goal is not to become the next Arnold Schwarzenegger, nor is it to be a strength athlete. Bob's program should be tailored around his individual needs based on his goals, such as what he really wants this all to lead to is performance with ball hockey. He wants to get back into playing ball hockey regularly, so he likely doesn't need a big bodybuilding program to do that. The second thing we need to assess are the actual movements prescribed in the program. Does Bob really have to do barbell squats and deadlifts? Don't get me wrong, these are fantastic exercises, but they can have a high learning curve. Does Bob want to go through the process of learning proper technique, which itself takes time, energy, and a knowledgeable coach? So these are what Bob was performing on his program that he saw on the bodybuilding website. He was doing barbell squats, but he was doing them with poor form, such as he was too high above parallel, so the crease in his hips wasn't level with the top of his knee. He was well above that, and he kept all the weight on his heels. He was also performing barbell deadlifts with poor form, such as he was not bracing his abdominals correctly. He was deadlifting with a very rounded back, and he was hitching the weight. So hitching is when you rest the weight on your thighs and then start to almost hump the weight up, essentially. So here are some possible fixes, and these are just a few out of an almost infinite number of possibilities. Barbell squats could be changed to either goblet squats or Bulgarian split squats. These can help teach balance, and they have a much lower learning curve. The barbell deadlifts could be changed to trap bar deadlifts or low rack pulls or low rack deadlifts. You can focus more on either the back or legs, depending on those variations that you choose, and they also have a lower learning curve. Or Bob can hire a good coach, or even devote time to learning the proper form from resources online, and be able to perform the proper barbell lifts. Now, the next step is going to be monitoring his stress levels. So, stress, anxiety, fears, nocebos are all things that are regulated by the limbic brain, which is heavily influenced by a certain type of nociceptor, which is a pain neurotransmitter. I've talked about this in my previous video, so if you want to go watch that, that has a lot more information on this. Basically, if you have multiple life stressors going on, such as unexpected bills, your spouse and kid are sick, you might be expecting a layoff, you have lack of sleep and poor nutrition, these are all things that can hamper recovery, and some actually influence our current experience of pain, similar to taking a dial and cranking it from a 3 all the way up to a 10. Even though the actual symptom, the pain itself, there's no physical reason for it to be that much increased. It can be, a large part could be neurological. One thing you can do is you can keep track of your stress. So some people find it beneficial to rank themselves from a 1 to 10 on the day and see if there are any trends from pain to current life stressors. Now, in Bob's case, Bob's been getting ready to start training, as we all know. His boss has just informed him that there will be cutbacks to his job, meaning less hours. And so to keep up with the bills and payments on his brand new Camaro he bought last month, he has to take up another job. So that's one life stress. Bob has also mentioned to his friends that he was back in the gym and that he was performing this brand new workout program he found online. His good friend Lazy Bill told him that he heard on a late night program that squats and deadlifts are bad for your back and knees. Bob works manual labor and he can't afford to get injuries, especially around layoff season. So he's anxious about his job and fearful now that he thinks these fantastic exercises are the bane of his body's existence, thanks to Lazy Bill. So how do we help Bob? Let's go back to the load managing. So for load management, Bob should not be doing a bodybuilding program for his goals, in my opinion, especially after being very on and off with his previous gym experience and not building a really good base. We would need to dial his program back to make things more manageable for someone at his level of experience and prioritize the things he enjoys and will suit his needs of ball hockey and not hinder him. So my recommendations for Bob would be 3 days a week instead of 4 days a week, for 45 minutes to an hour, full body movements instead of a body part split. So the way you perform this, you would do 1 to 2 compound exercises for lower body, compound meaning multi-joint movements, and 1 to 2 compound movements for upper body, complemented by some easy basic plyometrics and then some abdominal exercises. With these recommendations, he can still recover enough for ball hockey and work and still have enough time for his second job. He would use this as his base, and he can add to the program later once he gets more accustomed to the exercises. He's also still performing more total volume and work than he was previously because he isn't missing a week out of the month, and he's going 3 days consistently instead of 1 to 3 days. Now, how do we help Bob when it comes to movement selection? So Bob has a couple options here. He needs to either find a coach to teach him how to perform the movements he's chosen, or he needs to swap the movements out for similar types of movements with a lower learning curve, and preferably still free weight focus and their athletic movements. If Bob does choose to do the same exercise and doesn't find a coach, he needs to devote the time and effort into learning proper form and all the small nuances required to perform them in a safe and effective manner. And now we're helping Bob when it comes to monitoring his stress levels. So right away, Bob should stop listening to his friend Lazy Bill. Even though Lazy Bill's heart was in the right place, he commented on something outside of his realm of expertise without researching anything, and he's also unknowingly noceboed his good friend Bob, thus increasing Bob's fear of movement and influencing Bob's perceived pain. Bob has a few options here as well. One thing he can be using any enjoyable activity to kind of calm himself down, such as massage therapy, reading, or watching some TV, etc. Bob could also monitor his stress levels from 1 to 10 and use that to judge his workouts. So, for example, if Bob usually performs 10 repetitions with 100 pounds on squats on average, on one particularly stressful day, maybe he forgot his wife's anniversary, he rates his stress at an 8 to 10. So instead of doing 10 repetitions at 100 pounds, he chooses 10 repetitions at 85 pounds instead, due to the increased stress levels. Conversely, if Bob has a really low stress day and everything's been coming up Bob, and he rates his stress at 1 to 10, or 1 out of 10, he could now perform maybe 10 reps with 120 pounds, and maybe that would feel really good. But all that out of the way, some take-home points would be, if we want to become better at something, we need to do it more. However, if we get pain, we better be modifying certain factors within our control instead of trying to bootstrap it, hoping it'll just get better automatically. In that same vein, pain doesn't always mean tissue damage. There are many instances where pain is just sensitive tissue or movement, or caused by a psychological nocebo effect. Again, we can somewhat control these factors by modifying these few steps. If you feel pain and want to get better, we need to perform non-painful stressors so that our body can become more robust and resilient. Rest is only really good in the very short term, but long-term rest will definitely not make you better at any physical activity. If Bob sticks to his new recommendations, he will consistently outperform anyone else who would otherwise choose to rest instead of modifying. One big thing to keep in mind with everybody is that musculoskeletal pain and irritation is about as common as getting an itch. It's impossible to avoid it entirely throughout life, but having tools that we can use and people who are educated in rehab in your life can be a tremendous help in reducing the frequency of it and even helping get over it in the short term. But anyways, that's all I had to say about this. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more videos.